Auburn's in a very similar situation as Georgia. Big question mark, three-man battle for the quarterback position there, and a lot of change over the head coaching position, which is odd at Auburn because we're going into Malzahn's fourth year as head coach. Here's a stat for you. The 11 coaches on staff, they average 1.6 years of tenure at the school. You have 5 first-year assistant coaches at Auburn. That kind of stuck out to me. It's going to be interesting to see how those assistant coaches implement their styles and their systems or adapt to their coordinator on the offensive perspective during spring practice and how they connect with the guys. So that's 5 different units who are going to have to establish those relationships. Of course, new defensive coordinator Kevin Steele and keeping offensive coordinator Rhett Lashley, who is kind of the focus of a lot of the criticism from the fans coming into this year. Like I said, Malzahn started out 12-2, 8-5 the next year, and 7-6 last year. And if you look at their schedule, it's going to be tough to get to 6-6 this year. So how hot will Malzahn's seat be at the end of the year? So that's kind of the coaching situation. A lot of fans upset that they lost Demanian Craig, the wide receiver coach, former Auburn player. So there's a lot of people looking at the coaching situation there at Auburn, not very happy about it. Transitioning over to the quarterbacks, you hit on it. John Franklin III's had a lot of coaching talk, but from the couple of people I've talked to, they seem to think Jeremy Johnson's going to win this job again this year. I've heard the comments laser focused more than once about his preparation and his development this spring, and I've also heard that he's very well trusted inside the locker room. Dave just talked about leadership from Bryce Ramsey. I've been told that Jeremy Johnson's leadership is what is going to win him the job as a quarterback. I've also heard that you might see John Franklin in the Wildcat, particularly against a defense like Clemson. So it looks like, from my perspective, it's a two-man race. If Jeremy Johnson can show some consistency and get that confidence, I think he'll be the starter. If not, Malzahn, kind of the opposite of Kirby Smart, he probably doesn't value consistency as much as he values the wow factor. So, of course, John Franklin III does have a shot if he can continue to demonstrate that. But I think it's a two-man race between Franklin and Johnson. I'll leave you with this. The single most important person to watch over the spring is the center. They lost 2 offensive tackles. They moved last year's center to tackle, and they've started they're giving first-team reps to a new center by the name of Xavier Dampier. If you've read Malzahn's book or if you studied his offense, you know how critically important the center is in that offense. Much like the NFL pro styles, the center is very much that second quarterback, very key to the coverages. And when you run that type of offense, it's all about the numbers on which side of the line determines which side the ball is going to go to. I don't want to get too football nerdy on you, but that center is a critically important position. They've changed that this year. So a lot of question marks, coaches, quarterbacks, and offensive line. It could be another tough year there on the Plains.
Yeah, well, this is the place to get football nerdy on us, Mike, so you can break that out anytime you'd like. So we're the guys that are going to listen to that. There's no doubt about it. We might have some people running for the exits online, but Dave and I will certainly listen to you. And what makes up battles and matchups more than anything are styles. And these 3 quarterbacks have somewhat distinct styles. Jeremy Johnson's the guy that stands tall in the pocket. He's 6'5", but he's got some athleticism to break, contain, and be a running threat. That's not what he does best, but he has to make the defense respect the run. Sean White's pretty much a standard drop-back passer that can make all the throws. He's a really good quarterback, and well, a stat that really stands out to me is he threw 1 touchdown in 143 pass attempts last year. That's how anemic the offense was for the Auburn Tigers, throwing the football downfield and not able to complement some really good running backs, Jovan Robinson and Peyton Barber in particular last year. And then you got now John Franklin III, the mystery guy, the guy that we've only heard about, and his skill set, which is typically dual threat, although his throwing mechanics aren't supposed to be the best, and he's really going to rely on running the football to move the ball for the Auburn Tigers if he can win the job. So, David, that sets up the big 3 in regards to this Auburn quarterback position, and we talked just a few minutes ago about the national championship game, but things have changed quite a bit at Auburn, and Gus Malzahn's going to really rely on the quarterback to bail him out of a hot seat there on the Plains.
And it's scary, if you think about. I think if you look at the coaches and what they have to do this spring, and Mark, you mentioned these quarterbacks do have different styles. So how much do you practice, one style, and then you switch quarterbacks, and you can't keep calling the same, run plays when Franklin's behind center, or when either White or Johnson are back there. So more quarterback centric run with him back there. So that changes what the receivers are doing, what the running backs are doing, to a degree. So I think it's a little bit of play with the players as well when they have to sit there and maybe play a different style with whoever's behind center. How many right reps are they getting, and to get take that next step to save Malzahn's job, because you're right, because it's going to be on these quarterbacks. And Franklin, you mentioned where he's got to get better at throwing the ball. It was Nick Marshall came in as a converted defensive back and could throw the ball enough to make that offense dangerous. Can Franklin take that next step to at least get that good? When being able to run the ball as good as Auburn did, that left a good bit of passing lanes open, and that's why you saw wide receivers, they were running wide open, to complete passes, or they had the big receiver that you could just throw it up deep and the guys would go get the ball. So I find it interesting to see what system they may go with, and how that affects the rest of the playmakers on offense. I think if they go with Sean White and Jeremy Johnson, the rotating receivers that they're going through this spring right now, we need to be utilized more. And if they go with Franklin, I think you'll see that the crazy running game that you saw just a couple of years ago. And Franklin has looked good in the scrimmage, and I'll mention the scrimmage where the quarterbacks were allowed to get hit. Malzahn took the safety jerseys off of them, and he wanted them to get a little bit of contact. But Franklin busted a 70-yard run, and that was a big surprise to everyone, they said. And but Jeremy Johnson, to not be let down, he had a 75-yard touchdown pass to Rock Thomas on a wheel route. So quarterbacks are making plays, and I thought it was interesting. Yesterday at practice, Jeremy Johnson was a first-team quarterback. John Franklin was a second-team quarterback. And then walk-on Devin Adams played with the third team. Sean White was nowhere to be found. And I still haven't really found or heard anything of where he was at. So I don't know if that's, where we see that maybe he's not in the race, or is just something happened? So Jeremy Johnson, John Franklin, is it a two-man race? Who knows? But you're right. Spring is very important. They got their game this weekend, and we'll see what quarterback turns up with the lights on.
When I think of Nick Marshall's deficiencies at quarterback, I think back to the third or fourth play of the national championship game against Florida State, and they had run the ball well for 3 or 4 plays, and they pulled up for a play action, and he had the kid in the seam wide open, and he just threw the ball into the ground. But at the same time, he was so sleight of hand, and he could make enough throws to get the job done. To Mike's point about the center for the Auburn Tigers, Reese Dismukes was one of the better ones in the country, and he was the center for that team that, of course, was running wild against the better defenses in the SEC, and he was one of the big reasons why. And it didn't hurt that they had the second overall pick in the draft at left tackle in Greg Robinson. Ricardo Lewis, moving on, hopefully for him to the NFL, but certainly off campus, and he was the biggest receiving threat for this team last year. Didn't have big numbers, but once they lost Sammy Coates to the NFL, Duke Williams suspended. He was supposed to be replacing Coates and be even a better version of Sammy Coates, and he moved on. Now they lose Ricardo Lewis. The recruiting class and numbers say that the wide receiver core should be in good shape with a lot of young players, but they haven't proven it. So a lot of talent at wide receiver, but these guys have yet to get the job done or show us anything actually on the field.